And this perhaps is the issue ultimately that I think is why people voted, or 3 million of them, asked for another general election. It is the breach of trust between Westminster and the country on immigration. I'm not even discussing the boats.
Nigel Farage just exposed a shocking development in British politics, and it has left Starmer terrified.
There's no logical argument for this whatsoever, other than both the government in certain parts of the north and the Conservative Party in most of the south don't want to face reform. That is what is happening. I am very, very angry about this, as should voters be.
Reform UK is fuming with anger, and Farage is not going to let Starmer get away with his latest, most disgusting betrayal.
Well, the thing is, Reform is definitely winning at the moment, right? Because Labour are flailing and failing on all sorts of issues. Immigration, NHS, obviously grooming gangs, etc. But the Tories also didn't do that well. So it's very easy. You know, Reform at the moment sort of have a clean slate.
Labour and the Tories are trembling at the thought of Farage winning the next election, and it just might happen.
What they were actually expressing was a sense of utter disenchantment with the entire political system. And this debate can be used as a game of ping-pong this afternoon between the two political parties that have dominated British politics since the end of the First World War. But actually something bigger is going on out there.
Right off the bat, Farage dropped a bombshell that people aren't just fed up, there's something deeper going on.
Have a think about the fact that the Labour Party got a third of the vote and 2/3 of the seats. For every Labour MP, there are 34,000 votes. For every Reform MP, 820,000 votes. When you think about that and give it some context, perhaps it's not surprising that confidence in the whole system is breaking down.
The only reason Starmer and his misery party won was because the system is broken.
But over 50 years, I can't think of a government that has seen a collapse in confidence as quickly as this one has. There are 26,000 pensioners in the constituency of Clacton alone that are losing their winter fuel allowance. They had no idea this was going to happen on the day of the general election.
Labour turned out to be so incompetent that it's both pathetic and shocking for the British public.
And with the national insurance increases, yet another hammer blow to the men and women running small businesses in this country. They had not expected this. They were promised it wouldn't happen in the run-up to the general election. And we find that even now affects GP surgeries in the constituency and hospices close to it. So perhaps you can see why people are upset. They feel things are being done to them they didn't have realistic expectations of.
Starmer and his cronies have been betraying the entire nation with their countless lies and broken promises.
The economy works on confidence. People borrow money, lend money according to confidence in each other. And in the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I mean, we've got two people who look like they're going to a family funeral every day. There is an air of miserablism. Even a speech from the Prime Minister, the complete opposite to Tony Blair. This isn't things can only get better, it's things can only get worse.
It is no surprise that Starmer and Rachel Reeves have been a duo of doom for this nation, and Farage isn't holding back.
The idea of a 22 billion black hole is nonsense. It's 2.7 trillion. The national debt is massive. It exploded over the course of the last... It increased by 2.5 times over the course of the last 14 years, and it's set to go higher still. We are in much deeper difficulty economically. Even to talk about a £22 billion black hole is not to understand the problems that we've got. We have zero growth in this country.
The whole 22 billion black hole idea was nothing more than a shameless excuse Starmer used to hide the bigger problem.
That this government has talked us into a recession because confidence is falling to that degree. And you might note that the more rapidly legal migration rises, the more rapidly the population expands, the poorer we get as individuals. The last 2 years have seen record levels of net migration into Britain. And in 6 of the last 8 quarters, GDP per capita has fallen.
Starmer has not only failed the economy, he's been humiliated on the immigration issue as well.
That I think is why people voted, or 3 million of them, asked for another general election. It is the breach of trust between Westminster and the country on immigration. I'm not even discussing the boats. I'm talking about a population that has risen by over 10 million in the last 20 years. The impact of that on primary school availability, the impact of that on housing, the impact of that on people's wages.
Millions of people want to get rid of this shambolic government, and there's countless reasons for that. Whether you look at their economic policies, their social messes, or Labour's general incompetence, there's plenty of reasons to boot them out of power. However, the biggest issue of all is how Starmer failed to smash the gangs despite his repeated promises. Britain is being ruined every day with this huge influx of uncontrolled migrants, while Labour is trying to cover it up. They want you to believe that it isn't a huge issue, but you wouldn't believe the actual statistics on just how big of a problem it has become. Things are about to turn around, and Farage just might end up as the winner.
Nigel Farage, you're creeping ahead, you're neck and neck. Will you streak ahead, but will you fall at the final hurdle?
Well, I don't know. It depends whether it's a flat race or a jump race, doesn't it, Chris? Yeah, we're here at Sandown Park tonight. I've organised a whole series of these meetings to get the party ready for the county council elections on May the 1st.
Labour is absolutely terrified of what's happening in the country right now. People are shifting towards Reform UK at record levels, and this has never been seen before in the history of this nation. We're witnessing Labour losing all support in just 6 months, the Tories crumbling, and a third party, Reform, that came out of nowhere, becoming an overnight superstar in British politics. But what is causing such growth, and why are people so eager to trust Farage over Starmer and Kemi Badenoch?
And I've got a room full of candidates, of agents, of people getting ready, that all of those councils have applied for this year's elections to be cancelled. To be literally to be cancelled, and the government have this devolution plan. They want to get rid of county councils, district councils, put unitaries in, some new obscure idea of mayors for regions or counties, which, by the way, no one's ever asked for.
Behind the scenes, Starmer and the Labour parties are doing something so disgusting that it has left Farage fuming. Not only that, it's a complete sabotage attempt and an utter disgrace to democracy. What they're trying to do, on the surface, is completely restructure the way local councils work by shifting powers to mayors, but that's not what Farage is mad about. Firstly, nobody asked or voted for this change, and Labour's explanation has been wishy-washy.
And it looks like over 10 million people who were due to have a vote 4 years on from the last time for their local representatives are going to be denied that. And this is an act of cowardice on behalf of the Conservatives that run all of these councils. They don't want to face reform on May the 1st. They know they're going to lose their jobs, and also lose their money. It's an act of cowardice, it's a denial of democracy, and frankly, it's a disgrace.
It's not just the Labour Party either. Unexpectedly, the Tories have decided to team up with Labour in an attempt to keep Reform UK away. They're so terrified of Nigel Farage and the support he's been gaining that they're using shady, underhanded tactics to try and stop him. You might not like Nigel Farage and what he's seeing, but sabotage like this is unaffordable and a complete betrayal of your democratic rights.
But how it's all going to work, I don't know, because the mayors will have power over planning and transport. So what does that mean the unitaries are going to do? I mean, the whole thing is a dog's dinner. I would say this to you. The big reorganisations, I mean, here we are in Surrey. Apparently, this big reorganisation won't be ready until 2028. Well, why not go ahead with the elections? Because that's nearly the whole of the term. There is no logical argument for this whatsoever.
Angela Rayner and Starmer have been whining about this huge reorganisation for a while, but we've heard no real plan or explanation of how it will actually happen. What's more interesting is that this plan is supposed to happen quite a while from now, so why is Labour using it as an excuse to delay the elections now? And why are the Tories not saying anything about it? It's simply because both these parties know they'll lose miserably and are trying to buy time. Labour is doing damage control, and Kemi Badenoch is trying to completely overhaul the Tories.
I am very, very angry about this, as should voters be.
But there'll be votes next year, won't there? I mean, delaying by a year in an electoral cycle, if they're allowed to vote next year in those seats you mentioned, what's wrong with that?
Well, it may be 2028. So you could find a Conservative county councillor elected in 2021 when the Tory party was riding high, holding that seat for 7 years, which is no longer representative of the way politics is. No, it's outrageous.
We've never seen British politicians stoop this low, and what Starmer is doing is truly unique in the worst ways possible. Farage is angry, and he has every right to be angry. This isn't just about the Reform Party being denied power, it's about the British public being denied their fundamental right to vote. People want to express just how fed up they are with this government, and that is why we've seen the petition gain such insane momentum and support in a very small amount of time. The Tories would have teamed up with Farage instead, but it's likely that he simply refused for a shocking reason.
It's a big year for you, 2025. The right is split. You're doing well in the polls now. You're tied at 25 points each, according to one poll. Other polls say on average you're just behind the Tory party in third place. Why not do a deal with the Tories? Why not unite the right, Nigel Farage?
You're too old, Chris. You've been around too long. The Tory party's dying. And the only people that can't see it are those in Westminster, because things are as they've always been. Get out into the country, the party is dying. We've not reached the floor.
That's right. Nigel Farage thinks that the Tory party is dying, and he might not be entirely wrong. After their humiliating defeat in the recent elections, the Tories have done everything they can to win back support, but that has proved to be an incredibly difficult task. Sure, Kemi Badenoch is in charge now, and she's trying to turn things around, but it might be too little too late. Of course, the Tories are nowhere near the shambolic mess that Labour is, but it's going to take them a long time to regain trust, which is why Farage is against joining hands with the Tories and is intent on going solo. That might sound strange to you, but the recent polls show an entirely different story.
For the first time in British political history, Nigel Farage and the Reform Party have topped the national polls, sharing first place with the Labour Party on 25% of the vote, 5 points clear of Kemi Badenoch and the Tories. The poll by Find Out Now, a very respected pollster, has dropped a bomb in Westminster.
Reform UK and Nigel Farage have done the unimaginable. Nobody thought that such a small and fringe party would gain this level of support from the British public in such a small amount of time. Think about it. Just a few months ago, Starmer and his gang were topping the charts, and now they're right down in the gutter. Of course, most of it is because Starmer has made every horrible decision possible, but it goes deeper than that. Further details show that Farage's demographic is much better than Labour.
But that Reform is also more popular than the Tories among every age group except pensioners. It is also, this poll suggests, the most popular party in British politics among men. But what's driving all of this?
Remember how Starmer was alienating every possible group of voters in the country, from farmers to pensioners and the working class Brits? Naturally, Farage's message of transparency, accountability, and competence resonated with these people, and they're rushing to support him. What's more interesting is how the future generation of this country has faith in the Reform UK. Every passing day, the chances of Farage becoming the next Prime Minister keep increasing at a rate that has left both Labour and the Tories trembling.
Number one, stopping the illegal migration crisis with the small boats on the Channel. And number two, stopping legal migration, bringing the overall level of legal migration down. Now, these concerns are certainly not unique to Reform Party voters. A lot of people in Westminster and the establishment will have you believe that these views belong to a fringe minority.
Everything ties back to the problem with immigration in this country. Make no mistake, it's a full-blown crisis now, and it affects each and every single one of us in ways you wouldn't expect. With record levels of immigrants flooding our country, it puts incredible pressure on our society and institutions. Naturally, that means things like healthcare and education are that much harder to access for the rest of us. Coupled with Starmer's broken promise to fix this issue and general love for migrants, it's no surprise that Farage is soaring high.
The establishment said that everybody in Britain would become more in favour of mass immigration when they just got used to it. But actually, if you look at some of the other polls, they were very wrong indeed. If you look, for example, at some of the latest polls by YouGov, 70% of the British people now say immigration is too high. And that is a record high.
Do not be fooled by Starmer's agenda. Labour has had the support of the mainstream media for a long time now. They're trying to downplay the situation and gaslight the people into believing that this isn't that big of a deal. Their audacity doesn't just end there. This delusional government has the nerve to say that this crisis is actually good for us, but nobody is buying that false narrative of multiculturalism anymore. People are waking up, and Labour seems to be on borrowed time.
86% of all immigration into Britain today is coming from outside of European nations. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility concedes that much of that migration is making us poorer, not richer. This is the space that the Reform Party is filling.
Now this is where reform comes in. Farage saw how the Tories failed to deliver on their promises to bring down immigration. Next, the Labour Party didn't help much either, and in fact ended up making things significantly worse. So now, the people are turning towards Reform UK, and they're offering the solution to this problem that's only costing us more and more the longer it continues. Remember, all the housing and benefits for these migrants are paid for by your tax money.
It's quite clear that Labour have reduced in the polls. They were at 29% until very recently. Right. They're now down to 25%, and that's not least because Keir Starmer is not doing very well at all. We've had the winter fuel allowance disaster, the budget's been a disaster. This whole rape gang scandal is a disaster.
Starmer has basically given success to Nigel Farage on a silver platter. Pretty much everything this incompetent and out-of-touch government has done so far has made our lives more miserable. On top of all that, they're shameless about it. Starmer's depressing and tone-deaf behaviour only serves to push people further away as they realise how idiotic this Prime Minister is. The way things are going, Farage is in for a treat, and Starmer will soon realise the consequences of messing with this country's pensioners, farmers, businesses, and the working class in general.
Now, it's been a dramatic week for Reform UK, who appear to have all the momentum, at least when it comes to generating headlines. Nigel Farage spoke at Chelmsford Racecourse earlier this afternoon and revealed a new membership milestone.
Oh, the ticker! And the ticker says 170,000!
Nigel Farage keeps on dropping bombshells one after another, and each is more shocking than the last one. Reform UK's membership figures have skyrocketed in mere weeks, and Starmer is having a mental breakdown over it. Believe it or not, the British people are shifting towards a new future, and it might just be the right choice over the incompetence of Labour. The momentum is strong, and there have been some serious polls revealing even more shocking news. What's more is that Farage has support from some very powerful people.
And Mr Farage also welcomed one Elon Musk support of his party.
Could he possibly be a donor to the party? Yes. Is he supportive of the party? Absolutely. Does he support me personally? No question about that. If he does donate money, he'll have to do it legally through a UK company. But I'll tell you something, whether he donates money to us or not, he makes us, with a young generation of people who view him as a hero figure, he makes us look cool. And I'll tell you what, there isn't much of that around in British politics these days.
None other than Elon Musk, who already despises Starmer, is on Farage's side now. They've joined hands, and rumours are that there will be a huge donation to Reform UK that might shift the entire narrative. It's not just about the money either. Musk's support and insight have allowed Farage to win over the youth of this country as well. Of course, just having enough members or money isn't going to win the elections, so does Farage stand any real chance?
Anyway, the criticism of reform comes in the assumption that membership numbers don't equal seats, and of course headlines don't generate MPs in Parliament. Certainly not in our electoral system anyway. After all, it was UKIP in 2015 that won nearly 4 million votes, do you remember? But ended up with just one seat.
It's not a guarantee that Farage will win the elections just because there are a lot of people in his party. Even if he gets funded by Elon Musk, that money won't directly equal Parliament seats. The bigger problem here is how the British election system is broken and the whole process is shaky. That's the whole reason Labour managed to win, despite the fact that not many people voted for them. Nevertheless, Reform UK has something serious to say about that, and Starmer isn't going to like it.
He said, bad news for those who still think first past the post system means Reform can't win the next general election. We're now at the point where if we win just 3 points of support from each of Labour and the Tories, Reform will form the next government. Yusuf was quoting a piece in the Daily Telegraph which claims Reform are just 6 points off becoming the biggest party in the UK. That's according to election predictors' electoral calculus.
Even if the current system is broken and badly balanced, Reform UK still has a huge chance to secure victory. In terms of the polls, they've already overtaken the Tories and are only slightly lagging behind the Labour Party. Keep in mind that they still have more than enough time to win over the rest of the public, so Nigel Farage has all the reasons to be optimistic.
If the party reached 28% of the popular votes at an election, it would likely become the largest force in the House of Commons, though short of an overall majority. On current polling trends, Reform would reach this threshold within 6 months if it continues to pick up support at the current rate.
6 months is not a lot of time. It's the same amount of time that Labour took to completely demolish this country on every front. Starmer went down in the gutter as the worst Prime Minister in recent history in that same period of time as well. Not just that, Reform UK is looking to get an overwhelming majority in the Parliament, and if that happens, whatever's left of Labour's reputation will be completely shattered.
The thing is, Reform is definitely winning at the moment, right? Because Labour are flailing and failing on all sorts of issues. Immigration, NHS, obviously grooming gangs, etc. But the Tories also didn't do that well. So it's very easy. You know, Reform at the moment sort of have a clean slate. So when Kemi came out and said there must be a national inquiry into the grooming scandal, grooming gang scandal, Nigel just as easily tweeted, "You had 14 years to do it, mate."
The reality of the matter is incredibly simple. The public trusted Starmer to solve a bunch of issues that he promised he would. Our fragile economy and healthcare system were just two of the most important ones that they miserably failed at fixing. Pair that with how many scandals Starmer has been involved in and you have the recipe for Labour's destruction. They have no credibility left and the Tories aren't doing much better either. Both these parties had their chance and disappointed the public. All things considered, Farage just might become the next Prime Minister, and that can be a good thing for our future. What he needs now is support, and that's something you can show by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.